You want to escape the city, build a tiny home, live off-grid, and finally breathe free from HOA tyranny and utility bills that cost more than your car payment. But what if I told you that 8 states are quietly rewriting laws to force off-grid women back into cities, treating tiny homes like illegal shanties and solar panels like acts of rebellion? We're talking North Carolina demanding minimum 600-square-foot homes, Tennessee requiring grid connections even if you've got solar, and Texas slapping 1,000-square-foot minimums on your freedom dreams. These aren't accidents. They're targeting retirees, single women, and anyone trying to live independently. One woman in Georgia built her perfect off-grid cottage only to get a demolition notice calling her home a nuisance. Let's expose these 8 states before they bulldoze your dreams too. Go ahead and smash that like button before the building inspector finds this video and fines me for spreading too much truth. Subscribe unless you want to miss out on which states still let you live free without asking permission from bureaucrats who've never held a hammer. You've spent your life working, dreaming of a simpler place, a patch of land, your own self-reliant little home, maybe off-grid, away from the noise and the red tape. And now you open your mailbox, and the local building inspector shows up. What if I told you there are 8 U.S. states right now quietly rewriting laws so that off-grid living, tiny homes, wells, septic tanks, and grid-free life are being treated like illegal choices? And yes, this often hits women living alone, retirees, folks on fixed incomes, hardest. If you're retired or semi-retired and thought you could escape the city, escape the HOA, escape the system, this video matters. Before we dive in, if you're tired of forced conformity and want the under-the-radar freedom stories, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I cover the opt-out strategies the mainstream won't touch. Here's what's happening right under your nose. Tiny home builders are being told by zoning boards, we don't allow structures under 600 square feet. Think about that. You want to live small, reduce your footprint, cut your costs, and some bureaucrat with a clipboard says your dream home is too small for their taste. Meanwhile, they're perfectly fine with massive McMansions that sit empty half the year because the owners can't afford to heat them. Off-grid wells and septic? Some counties now require connection to municipal sewer or water as a condition of occupancy. You drill your own well, install your own septic system, become completely self-sufficient, and they show up saying, sorry, you still have to pay us for services you don't use. It's like buying your own car, but being forced to pay for a taxi subscription because the city says so. Local building codes say you must hook to the electrical grid, even if you want solar or propane. Grid connection requirement now law. You've got solar panels generating more power than you need. You're completely energy independent, but nope. You still have to connect to their grid and pay their connection fees, because apparently freedom is only legal if you're still writing checks to the utility company. What I'm going to show you in the next 8 chapters. 8 states where new or aggressive interpretations of laws are pushing independent women, retirees, tiny home dwellers back into the city or into conventional housing. We're talking about places where living free has suddenly become a crime, where your composting toilet is treated like a public health crisis, and where your solar panels are somehow a threat to community standards. Then I'll offer some practical workarounds. Yes, you still have options. Because while these states are tightening the screws, there are still places in America where you can live on your own terms without asking permission from every petty official with a government badge. Let's get into it. Picture a wooded lot in western North Carolina. A retired woman buys 2 acres, builds a tiny home to live simply. Then the county says, sorry, your home doesn't meet the minimum square footage standard, so you have to hook to the sewer or vacate. Welcome to North Carolina, where the Blue Ridge Mountains are gorgeous, but the building codes will crush your tiny home dreams faster than a mountain landslide. Here's what they're pulling on you in the Tar Heel State. North Carolina's building code says habitable rooms must be at least 70 square feet. Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. Many counties are now interpreting dwelling unit rules so that tiny homes on wheels or anything less than 320 square feet built as RVs are not allowed for full-time occupancy. So you build your perfect little cabin, thinking you're living the dream, and some county official with a measuring tape shows up to tell you your bedroom is too small for human habitation. For a woman on a fixed income, this means you either pay through the nose to comply with a larger build and hook up to utilities, Or you're forced to pack up and leave the land you bought fair and square. It's like buying a car and being told you can only drive it on Sundays because it doesn't meet their arbitrary horsepower requirements. If you try to classify your tiny home as a standard dwelling, you'll face permit and inspection requirements that would make a NASA engineer weep. The bureaucrats will crawl over every inch of your home with clipboards and calculators, looking for reasons to reject your dream. In many counties, if your structure is under a certain size or built on wheels, you're treated like an RV, which means you're not allowed for permanent residence. They'll let you camp for a few weeks, but live there full-time? That's apparently too dangerous for their delicate sensibilities. Building departments may insist on grid power, standard septic or sewer, and minimum size footprint. Congratulations, you built an adorable 250-square-foot little cabin. Now you must enlarge it or pay top dollar because the county says we don't allow homes that small. You thought you could skip the septic field and go with a composting toilet. Nope. The inspector wants a full subsurface sewage disposal system that costs more than your entire tiny home. If it's on wheels, you're an RV. If it's under 320 square feet, you're not considered a house. So you're either illegal or temporary. It's like being told your perfectly good car doesn't count as transportation because it's not a pickup truck. But here's the thing. For those who did make it legal, you're living simply in the Blue Ridge with lower costs, fresh air, and freedom from HOA tyranny. You get to tell the bureaucrats no thanks. I live how I choose. The mountains don't care about your square footage, and neither should you. But just because North Carolina's moving the goalposts doesn't mean it's only the Tar Heel state. Next we head to the volunteer state, where the rules are getting even messier. You love Tennessee. Low taxes, rugged land, friendly faces, and mountains that don't ask for your permit before letting you enjoy the view. So you build that off-grid cabin thinking you've found freedom in the volunteer state. But then the county shows up with a clipboard and says you must connect to water, sewer, and electric to count as a legal dwelling. Score 1 for the control freaks who apparently think independence is a 4-letter word. Here's the Tennessee trap they've laid for you. The state has adopted the International Residential Code, including Appendix Q for tiny homes under 400 square feet. Sounds promising, right? Like they actually want to help you live small and free. But here's where the fine print gets you. Many localities interpret permanent residence as requiring hookups to utilities rather than truly off-grid living. According to their twisted logic, homes should be connected to county or city utilities. So much for that whole volunteer spirit they're supposedly famous for. For women on fixed incomes, this means extra costs that can bust your retirement budget faster than a medical emergency. You thought you were escaping the utility trap, but Tennessee says not so fast. You're still going to write those monthly checks whether you want their services or not. Tiny homes of 400 square feet or less can be built legally in many Tennessee counties. But here's the fine print that'll make your head spin. They often must be on a permanent foundation and have utility connections. If you don't connect, you're considered an unauthorized dwelling or a trailer park model. And you may not qualify for full residential zoning, insurance, or financing. It's like being told your perfectly good house doesn't count as a house because you didn't ask permission from the right bureaucrats. You hooked up solar panels and a composting system, living completely self-sufficiently, but they check the approved water supply box and you don't have it, so you're flagged as non-compliant. Never mind that your rainwater collection system works better than their municipal supply that tastes like chlorine and costs twice what it should. Tiny home on wheels? Good luck. Many counties allow only site-built, permanently anchored homes for full occupancy. They'll let you park your RV for vacation, but live in your custom-built tiny home year-round. That's apparently too dangerous for their delicate sensibilities. But if you make it through their bureaucratic obstacle course, you're living in scenic Tennessee with freedom away from the grid, lower rent, and utility costs, and fewer neighbors peering over your fence wondering what you're up to. You get that win-win. A better life with fewer bureaucrats breathing down your neck, telling you how to live on land you own. The mountains are still beautiful, the people are still friendly, and your tiny home is still perfect. It's just the government that's gotten too big for its britches. Sounds promising, right? But wait till you hear what's happening in Texas. That's where the sandbox looks free, but the rule book is rigged. Ah, Texas. Cowboy boots, wide open spaces, and the kind of freedom that comes with big sky country. So you think you can drop a tiny home, go off-grid, skip the HOA nonsense, and live like your great-grandparents did before bureaucrats invented permits for breathing. Then you learn your county demands a minimum dwelling size of 1,000 square feet. Oops. Turns out even in the land of don't mess with Texas, somebody's still messing with your right to live small. Here's how the Lone Star State lassos your tiny home dreams. In one Texas municipality ordinance, single-family detached units must have at least 1,000 square feet of living area. 1,000 square feet, that's bigger than most New York apartments that rent for $3,000 a month, while statewide tiny home regulations exist, and some counties allow 400 square feet under the International Residential Code. The zoning rules, local minimums, lot size requirements, and utility hookup mandates create barriers higher than a West Texas oil derrick. For retirees or single women on fixed incomes, building a full-sized house costs more than most people's retirement savings. Tiny homes were supposed to squeeze those costs down to something reasonable, but Texas bureaucrats apparently think living affordably is un-American. Even if you build under state code, you run into zoning minimums, lot area minimums, minimum dwelling size per unit, and utility connection requirements that would make a NASA launch seem simple. Some counties might accept tiny homes as accessory dwelling units or park models, but you'll still face restrictions on location, hookups, and classification that'll have you filling out more paperwork than a tax audit. Your plan was simple: a 300-square-foot cabin where you could retire in peace. Local zoning says minimum floor area for your district is 1,500 square feet. Suddenly your dream home is illegal, and you're either expanding your build or packing your bags. You skipped grid power because your solar setup works perfectly, but they call you non-compliant with dwelling unit standards. Now insurance companies reject you, financing becomes unavailable, and you're stuck in bureaucratic limbo because you dared to live independently. It's like being told your perfectly good car doesn't count as transportation because it doesn't have a truck bed. But for those who succeed in navigating this maze, you get sun, space, no northern snow, and land costs that won't bankrupt you. You can hold up that middle finger to the system and say, "Yeah, I built smart, but the system tried to force me to conform. I won anyway." Next state? The once promising North Carolina is only the beginning. In state number 4, you'll see septic and well permit crackdowns that sneak up when you least expect it. You bought 5 acres in North Dakota, drilled a well, installed solar panels, and set up a composting toilet? You're living the dream, completely self-sufficient, no utility bills, just you and the prairie wind. Then the county shows up with a stack of papers and says, "Sorry, your private well permit needs connection to municipal sewer, or you're not considered a legal residence." Welcome to North Dakota, where even the wide open spaces come with strings attached, and apparently your well water isn't good enough unless you're also paying for city sewer. Here's how they get you in the Peace Garden state. Many states permit private wells, but the regulation maze is thicker than a North Dakota blizzard. The paperwork alone requires detailed registration, construction standards that would make an engineer weep, and enough forms to wallpaper your tiny home. The authority over private wells sits at the state and local level, which means double the bureaucrats and twice the headaches. For independent women and older landowners, this means hidden costs and time that can turn your retirement dream into a regulatory nightmare. Your well permit requires water quality testing that costs more than your monthly grocery budget, setback requirements from septic and absorption fields that might force you to redesign your entire property, and registration of your drilling contractor like you're building a nuclear facility instead of accessing the water under your own land. Septic field regulations often require connection to public sewer if it's available, or you have to meet complex soil and lot size standards that would challenge a civil engineer. Your solar array? That's fine. They love renewable energy when it makes them look progressive. But you drilled your own well? The code says the well must be permitted and plugged if abandoned, and if you miss filling out the right form at the right time, you risk enforcement action that could shut down your entire setup. You installed a composting toilet because it's environmentally friendly and cost-effective. The water board says you must connect to a septic system or you're classified as an RV, not a real home. It's like being told your homegrown tomatoes don't count as vegetables because you didn't buy them from the grocery store. Your well water is probably cleaner than anything coming out of city pipes. But apparently, independence is suspicious when there are utility bills to be collected. If you navigate the regulatory maze successfully, you get true autonomy, living off-grid at a fraction of the cost, controlling your own water supply and telling the utility companies exactly where they can stick their monthly bills. You beat the system and proved you don't need their permission to live free on your own land. Let's turn our sights to state number 5, where building code minimums and classification tricks are actively used to shut down tiny home freedom. Ohio, nice Midwestern soil, cheaper land, and the kind of practical people who know how to fix things with duct tape and common sense. You think you found your freedom spot, away from the coastal craziness and big city bureaucracy. Then you discover many municipalities enforce minimum dwelling unit sizes of 1,000 square feet or more and treat your perfectly crafted tiny home like a glorified garage apartment. Welcome to Ohio, where being practical is only legal if you're practical on their terms. Here's the Ohio shell game they're running on you. Many municipalities have minimums of 1,000 square feet for a dwelling unit, which sounds reasonable until you realize they're forcing you to build in heat space you don't need just to satisfy some bureaucrat's idea of what constitutes proper housing. Zoning today still uses old-school rules written when families had 8 kids and needed space for 3 generations under one roof. Your tiny dwelling doesn't qualify as a house in their minds, so they slap it with classification as an accessory unit or illegal use. You may secure a building permit under state code, thinking you've cleared the hurdles, but local zoning swoops in like a hawk and says, minimum floor area per unit or dwelling unit must be at least 1,000 square feet. Banks and insurers don't treat tiny homes as standard homes either, so financing becomes nearly impossible. It's like being told your perfectly good money isn't real currency because the bills are too small. You built a 350 square foot off-grid cabin that's more comfortable and efficient than most McMansions, but zoning says minimum 1,000 square foot dwelling unit. You either expand and blow your budget or sit there unpermitted while they send you threatening letters about code violations. Insurance companies look at your beautiful tiny home and say, this structure doesn't meet dwelling unit standards, so you're excluded from coverage. Apparently, living efficiently is too risky for their actuarial tables. It's like being told your Honda Civic doesn't count as a car because it's not a pickup truck. Your tiny home has everything you need: kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, living space. But because some zoning board decided decades ago that happiness requires at least 1,000 square feet, your dream home is suddenly a code violation. But if you do manage to navigate their bureaucratic obstacle course, you're one of the few who pulled it off. You're living small, keeping expenses minimal, and proving that good things do come in small packages. You get to say, I beat the minimum size racket and I'm living free even when the system says no. The neighbors might be jealous of your tiny utility bills while they're heating rooms they never use. Only 3 states left in our top 8, and yes, one of them is Arizona with septic and well enforcement, and finally our closing state where women in tiny homes got their homes bulldozed. Stay tuned. Sunset on your own desert property, off-grid, living among the cacti and silence that stretches for miles. This is Arizona, the land where rugged individualists came to escape civilization and live free under endless blue skies. Perfect until the county rolls up with paperwork and says you've got to hook to sewer, and your tiny home doesn't qualify under the zoning ordinance. No permit, no certificate of occupancy. Pack your bags and head back to suburbia. Welcome to Arizona, where even the desert comes with a homeowners association. Here's how the Grand Canyon State lassos your freedom dreams. Many western states, including Arizona, require connections to approved sewage or septic systems when your dwelling is classified as permanent. Your off-grid designs with composting toilets and gray water systems may work perfectly for desert living, but they fail to meet the standard system requirements that bureaucrats copied from places where it actually rains. For self-reliant living, That means hidden costs that can drain your retirement savings faster than water evaporates in Phoenix summer. Septic systems in Arizona require soil tests, permits, and often large lot sizes that complicate your cheap off-grid build. Well, drilling comes with its own permit circus, standards for casing, distance requirements from septic fields, and registration requirements that treat accessing groundwater like you're drilling for oil. You installed a composting toilet and gray water system that works beautifully in the desert climate, but the county says, sorry, you must have a septic field per code. Either expand your costs or you're living illegally on your own land. You thought your desert lot was remote enough to escape the regulatory tentacles, but the county still enforces dwelling must connect to approved water supply and approved sewage disposal. Never mind that your rainwater collection and well water are cleaner than anything coming out of Phoenix taps, or that your composting system is more environmentally sound than pumping waste into desert groundwater. Apparently, independence is only legal if you're still writing checks to approved contractors and following approved methods. It's like being told your perfectly good cactus garden doesn't count as landscaping because you didn't plant grass that requires constant watering in a place where water is precious. Your systems work better for the environment and your budget, but they don't generate the right fees and permits to keep the bureaucratic machine running. If you clear the regulatory hurdles, you're living free under bright desert sun with no HOA telling you what color to paint your mailbox, low living costs, and your own little kingdom where the nearest neighbor might be a roadrunner with attitude. You can look at those red rock formations and say they said I couldn't do it, but I did it anyway. State 7 is coming up, where building codes now mandate grid connection to electrical utilities. Yes, some places are actually forbidding you from going off-grid entirely. You move to rural Northern California, hoping to live simply among the redwoods and rolling hills, far from the Silicon Valley madness and Los Angeles traffic nightmares. But you discover the building code and zoning expect 1,000-plus square-foot houses, grid power, and full municipal hookups even in the middle of nowhere. Your tiny cabin is seen as temporary at best, illegal at worst. Welcome to California, where even the trees need permits, and your dream home doesn't meet their inflated standards of what constitutes proper housing. Here's the Golden State gotcha that'll drain your retirement fund faster than gas prices in San Francisco. California's minimum dwelling unit size varies widely, but many local jurisdictions preclude very small units for full-time residents. The bureaucrats have created a patchwork of regulations where minimum square footage depends on the county or city, but the theme is consistent. Bigger's better, and if you want to live small, you're probably breaking someone's rule. Zoning often excludes tiny homes from being considered a dwelling unit if they're under a certain size, on wheels, or lacking utility connections. Even if you build under state code, thinking you followed all the rules, local building and zoning departments swoop in demanding grid electricity, full plumbing, and minimum size requirements that would make a McMansion developer proud. Your design is a beautiful 300-square-foot cabin with solar panels and a well, but the county says we don't support structures that small for permanent residents. Insurance and financing companies look at your efficient little home and consider it a non-standard dwelling. So maybe no coverage, maybe they treat you like you're living in an RV. It's like being told your fuel-efficient car doesn't count as transportation because it doesn't guzzle enough gas. Off-grid solar plus rainwater collection plus composting toilet, the county may stamp your application with no permit, classified as RV or temporary camp, not permanent house. Never mind that your systems work better than the municipal alternatives and cost a fraction of what city dwellers pay for inferior service. If you beat the odds and navigate their regulatory maze, you're living in the lush California landscape, spending far less than typical homeowners and escaping the suburban rat race that turns people into debt slaves. You get to say they set the bar impossibly high, but I lowered it for myself and lived better than people paying 10 times what I spend. Finally, state number 8. The place where tiny homes, especially those occupied by single women or older folks, have been literally bulldozed by authorities. This one's a wake-up call you won't forget. Imagine you're an older single woman who bought a small lot in rural Georgia, built a cozy off-grid cottage where you can garden, read books, and enjoy your retirement in peace. Then the zoning board shows up with clipboards and calls your beautiful little home a nuisance, demanding you sell the property or face demolition. Yes, this actually happens in Georgia. where apparently living quietly on your own land is somehow offensive to bureaucrats who think everyone should be packed into subdivisions paying maximum property taxes. Here's how the Peach State crushes your tiny home dreams with the subtlety of a bulldozer. Georgia's minimum dwelling unit size is often stipulated by local codes that require at least one habitable room of 70 square feet, with other rooms also 70 square feet and no less than 7 feet in horizontal dimension. But here's where they get creative with their oppression. Tiny homes find themselves squeezed by definitions, classification games, and local powers that would make a mob boss jealous. For women living alone, small land lots and tiny dwellings are ideal for security, affordability, and maintenance. But these rules push them back into normal houses or city living where they're easier to tax, regulate, and control. Your classification nightmare works like this. If your tiny home is on wheels, it equals RV in their minds. And most zoning districts only allow RVs seasonally, not full-time. Building inspectors find your perfectly livable home and declare it a non-compliant dwelling unit, then issue vacate orders or fines that can financially destroy you. You thought you were legal because you owned the land fair and square, paid your taxes, and bothered nobody. But local code says your home doesn't meet their dwelling unit size requirements. Demolish it or pay huge penalties that make federal taxes look reasonable. Banks look at your efficient little home and say, no financing for your structure because it's not a conventional dwelling, leaving you trapped between bureaucratic definitions that exist mainly to generate revenue and control. If you navigate this successfully, you live on your terms, avoid paying city utility bills that fund more bureaucrats, and reduce your overhead costs in retirement to something actually affordable. You get to tell the story they tried to push me back into the city where I'd be easier to monitor and tax. But I said no thanks and built my freedom anyway. These 8 states show the rule book changing in real time. Minimum size requirements, utility hookup mandates, classification hurdles, and zoning codes targeting tiny homes and off-grid arrangements. Your dreams of independent, self-reliant living are under coordinated attack, especially targeting older individuals, women alone, and budget-conscious retirees. But this isn't a defeat. It's a call to get strategic and fight smarter. If you're frustrated with this rigged system, you're not alone. You're watching bureaucrats use building codes and permit requirements as weapons. Whether you want to stay in the city paying their inflated utility bills or step off grid to live independently. But here's the thing. You can fight back, and you don't have to roll over just because some zoning board thinks your dreams are too small for their taste. We've covered 8 states where the rule book is changing faster than a politician's promises. North Carolina with their minimum square footage traps, Tennessee demanding utility hookups even when you don't need them, Texas slapping 1,000 square foot minimums on your freedom, North Dakota turning well permits into regulatory nightmares, Ohio treating tiny homes like illegal garden sheds, Arizona requiring sewer connections in the middle of the desert, California expecting McMansion standards in rural areas, and Georgia bulldozing perfectly good homes because they offend some bureaucrats' sensibilities. These aren't accidents or coincidences. This is a coordinated effort targeting the people who threaten their revenue streams. Retirees who want to stretch their fixed incomes, single women seeking affordable independence, and anyone trying to live self-reliantly without feeding the utility monopolies and permit mills that keep these petty tyrants employed. Your dreams of independent, self-reliant living are under pressure, but this isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of your education in beating them at their own game. The bureaucrats want you discouraged, confused, and willing to give up and move back to the city where you're easier to tax and control. But you didn't make it this far in life by giving up when some government employee with a clipboard told you no. You know there's always another way. Another state, another county, another loophole they haven't thought to close yet. My next video covers 5 states where off-grid living still has legal breathing room, hidden counties with tiny home-friendly zoning, property taxes near zero, and officials who still remember that America was built by people. who didn't ask permission to live free. Don't click away. That video is your playbook for action, your roadmap to the places where independence isn't a crime and living small isn't treated like a public health emergency. They tell you that you must live big, grid-connected, and city-bound. But you? You were born to live small, off-grid, and free. And as long as there's land to buy and brains to think with, the dream still lives. Laws change, but smart people change faster. So there you have it. 8 states where the American dream of living free on your own land is being systematically dismantled by bureaucrats who think your independence threatens their job security. From North Carolina's square footage police to Georgia's bulldozer brigades, they're using building codes like weapons against anyone who dares to live below their arbitrary standards. But here's what they don't want you to know. Every time they close one door, smart people find 10 others. While these 8 states are tightening the screws, there are still counties and states where living free isn't a crime, where your composting toilet won't trigger a SWAT raid, and where bureaucrats still remember that America was built by people who didn't ask permission to pursue happiness. You've survived decades of government expansion, economic crashes, and social upheaval. You're not about to let some zoning board with delusions of grandeur stop you from living the retirement you've earned. The system wants you discouraged and compliant, paying maximum taxes for minimum freedom. They're betting you'll give up and move back to the suburbs where you belong. But you didn't make it this far by following their script. You know that real freedom isn't granted by politicians. It's taken by people with enough backbone to ignore the rules that don't make sense. The next video reveals exactly where you can still win this game. Don't let them fool you into thinking it's over. The land of the free isn't dead. You just have to know where to look.